So we're here with Amara, and we're going to be talking about work ethic and a solid creative process. So we just basically want to hear about your work ethic and how you have created a strong creative process as a composer.
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, I think like everything, work ethic is everything. You know, the work ethic will either make or break you. And that goes for, I think anything that I say now will be the same in any career. If you put in a lot, you'll get a lot out of it. It's just the way the universe or God or, you know, it's that energy, I think, that sort of like flows right back in everything that you do. So what I have noticed, and what I noticed actually or while I was sort of doing this transition into the composing world, is I used to teach. And I sort of woke up one day and thought, I remember I wanted to be a composer. Maybe I could try and make that happen somehow. And I then started, obviously, you know, when you're teaching, you're working full days and, you know, from morning through till evening. And so what I would do is I would wake up an hour earlier than I used to, and I'd write music for no reason, for no monetary reason, just to write. And so I'd wake up an extra hour earlier and I'd start writing music, and then I'd go to work, be teaching, have my day, and then go home and do exactly the same thing through till sometimes midnight. And then in between that as well, I started networking, and I started reaching out to people and asking for some advice and some feedback. And again, not searching for work, but just searching for just advice. And so I sort of kept that up for not necessarily knowing where it was going to lead. You know, I was really fortunate in the teaching job. You know, I got to teach music every day, and you know, I had some other projects going, some gigs and that sort of thing. So, you know, I was really, you know, relatively happy, but I knew deep down the ultimate dream was that I wanted to be a composer. And, you know, this is only fairly recently, this is only about 3 years ago, I suppose, that I actually sort of had that conscious decision again. So I kept that sort of work ethic in a way up. And
that's hard to keep up, though.
It is.
Like, to get up early, then go and work all day, and then be creative again in the evening, and do that on a regular basis.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
Really,
and it's forced creativity as well, in a way. Like, even though you love doing it, it still becomes this
pressure.
This pressure, yeah. It's like you're clocking into your other job that you're not getting paid for in the monetary sense, but there's also that sense of fulfillment as well, because once you finish something, you become, well, at the time, you know, I might have been quite proud of it. I thought, gee, that sounds great. You know, I look back now and think, ugh, you know, what was I thinking? But, you know, it was all a learning curve, and you have to go through that. So that's the discipline, I think, that you have to put in from the very beginning. And then I just noticed over time, it just started to pay off. It started to, you know, I started meeting with these awesome people. A lot of amazing people started giving me time, and they started, you know, just mentoring me and giving me opportunities, which then started to eat into my weekends as well, because I'd be meeting with people and they'd be setting me sort of tasks and assignments to do, just to help me get better. And so, needless to say, it was just, you know, long nights, long days. But because there was this small sort of just bit by bit chipping away, I was seeing this progress. I thought maybe I could make something of this, until, you know, a couple of years later, I was able to leave teaching completely, you know, and not to say that I didn't enjoy teaching, you know, I really did, but ultimately the dream was to write music all the time, and, you know, and now I get to do that, and I feel really honoured and privileged, the fact that I can get up every day, work from home, and do that and make a living out of it as well. And I think it is because of that work ethic, and it's because of that discipline that you put in when you make that decision. I think now this sort of sounds like a cheesy, you know, motivational thing, but I think, you know, the minute you make a decision to yourself that I'm going to change my life, or I'm going to do something about it, and if you stick to that discipline and you sort of clock in, clock out like you would any other job, but just with this extra thing that you've taken on board, I think that's when you do start to see the results. And, you know, if you told me 5 years ago that I'd be doing what I'm doing now, I would have thought, but how? I'm a classroom teacher. You know, how's that going to happen? Yeah. But I think just the minute you start, you have to be able to go through the process and do both. You can't sort of say, oh, when I finish that job, then I'll focus on that, or I don't have the time. And look, I've spoken to lots of people, lots of friends as well, that you know, they might want to do a different sort of arts area or something. They, you know, might be in a band, or they might be solo artists, or something else, even like artists, painters, writers, and they say, oh, you know, I really want to do that, but they're not necessarily prepared to put in that time. And I think if you're prepared to put in the time, that's what you'll get out of it. Yeah. When
you work from home, how do you stop yourself from getting distracted, and how do you manage your time when you're just, you know, at home? It's hard. Some days are hard, you know, and you do find yourself getting distracted. I'm pretty hard on myself, actually. Look, in some ways, getting back to sort of what I was saying about when I was once I was able to leave teaching, I sort of, there was this element of fulfillment. I sort of thought, oh, ticked that off the box, you know, gee, I can now work from home, go me, you know, and there's this sort of this sense of achievement, and then which you have to be so careful of, because then you start to, you get into this this sort of cycle of then maybe not working as hard as you used to work, because you were
working really hard.
You were so focused on that.
But I'm not sure if I can do this, and you work hard, and then you get it, and then you go, oh, cool, I can do this. And then you get that sort of like lull where...
Exactly.
What are you working to next? Like, what's the next challenge?
That's it. And I think it's important that you have those sort of goals, because there have been times that, I have definitely gotten distracted and do get distracted, because I think, oh, maybe I don't need to work as hard today, I'll do that tomorrow, you know, because you see yourself in this very fortunate situation of, oh, I work from home now, I can do what I like. But the thing is, you can't. It's the same as before. You have to treat it with the same amount of discipline and passion that you had when you went into it. And
but then how, just leading on from that, how, like, if it's your 9 to 5 writing, how do you stay inspired to keep writing stuff like every day? Because obviously writing for an author or for a musician, like, inspiration comes and goes.
So I think that when I was teaching, the inspiration was to develop a new career. And so it was very clear, I'm writing music and that's I just want to do that. But then, when it becomes your job, like it is now, and you've got your briefs and this is what's required of me, that's the forced creativity, because somebody's kind of telling you, well, you're getting paid for this and there's a deadline and this is what we need and you have to do it regardless of inspiration, if it comes or not.
And do you have a process to get it flowing? Like, or
I do.
Down and start?
I think, look, sometimes I think it varies for everyone, and it varies for me as well, so depending on the brief. So recently I had to do a TV show, and the brief was, we want sort of something a little bit classical, Philip Glass meets Japanese, sort of, with slightly, I think, was urban or chill, or maybe a little bit of softer. Oh, gee, I can't remember exactly, but I know there was definitely Japanese and there was definitely Philip Glass. And in fact, when you get a brief like that, that's actually really interesting, because then you go, okay, I can have some fun with this. So what I do is I sort of sit in the car, or I sit, I turn on my iPod or whatever, listen to music, and I start listening to just a whole lot of Japanese music. And it could be anything. It could be Japanese rock, it can be Japanese, traditional Japanese, it can be just anything, even if it's not necessarily if the brief doesn't necessarily say that they want it to be that particular Japanese style, but just anything with Japanese. From that culture, yeah. Exactly, anything from Japanese culture. And then all of Philip Glass's sort of work. And so I think, in a way, in everything that you do, in your you're walking around the house and you've got your iPod on, you've got the CD on, and you're listening to things. You're in the car, you're listening to maybe even classic FM, and you're hearing sort of certain classical influences. All of that is the creative process. So in any time that you're spending away from your workstation, you're still being creative. And I think that's motivation in itself. So you might be driving along and you're listening to something and you think, that's going to be a really good idea. Maybe I'll sort of write that down. You know, and use that as an idea for later, so that when you get to your station, you've kind of actually been working on that. And look, that was sort of like a fun brief to do. And then there are other ones where they're a little bit more cut and dry, or there are the other briefs where it's, we want it to sound like Hans Zimmer. And you sort of think,
Which film?
that too, but you also sort of, you want to sometimes say, you want to sort of, maybe it's the ego that gets in the way, and you want to say, well, do you want it to sound exactly Hans Zimmer? Because he's kind of been done. People will then say, oh, that sounds a bit too Hans Zimmer. You know, you want to sort of like discuss other options with them, but sometimes they have it sort of completely in their head that, no, I want it this particular style, or I want it John Williams and it has to sound like this, you know. So I think it depends on the brief that you get, and how that influences your creativity as well, you know, and how that can sometimes actually inspire you anyway. And, you know, sometimes you just get a brief and it's just uninspiring and you just do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And is it like pencil on paper, writing stuff down, or is it in your phone?
You know, sometimes it is.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think, like, these days there's not much, unless it's a big film, and, you know, one day that'd be amazing. But unless it's a big film and you're like a big known composer, I think they don't need to see that score, or unless you've got live instrumentalists that are going to be playing your work, that's when it needs to be obviously orchestrated. And
I just mean in terms of you writing, like when you get an idea.
So when I get an idea, like sometimes sometimes I write down like a little melody, and sometimes I don't necessarily even have manuscript paper, you know, and I just sort of like draw out 5 lines. I did this on the plane, actually. People around me must have thought I was a lunatic. I was sort of like humming to myself, and, you know, you see all sorts of crazies on planes anyway.
Score that out.
And then, so you write down in fact, it's funny, I've actually got it here in this sort of thing that I carry around.
Yeah.
So, like, that's what I wrote, like, on the plane.
That's amazing.
Is I just wrote down some sort of, like, ideas, generally, and I actually haven't revisited it.
That's awesome.
You know,
you've got a solid grasp of score, of music notation.
Yeah. So that's my background, is classical music, and so and that kind of helps, I think, because in a way, and everybody has their own sort of way. You know, I have a friend, and she used to, she was a singer, and she used to she said, look, I'm not very good at music writing, but she'd write a dash, and then she'd say, I need to do, it's about here, and she'd do another dash here, and then we go all the way down there, and then we go all the way up here. And that seemed to work for her. She seemed to know how to
fit into a melody.
Fit into a melody. And so everybody works and like a graphic notation sort of process. But I think everybody has their sort of way. Sometimes I do it that way. Sometimes I have the voice recorder. And, you know, sometimes I'll be in a supermarket or something and an idea will come, and then you just sort of, you think that would be a really good horn line, or that would be a really good intro for a cello in a particular piece, and then so you're there sort of like in the corner trying to not look like too much of a weirdo into your phone, recording it. But, yeah, I think it's just sort of like, recording sounds as well, like could be an idle truck. You know, a truck is just sort of doing that, you know, that sort of sound. Yeah. And then you think that might be a really good sort of pulse for the underscore of something dark and ominous. You know, I might just record that, and you just sort of like record it for a bit. Cool, put that into your toolbox. So it's just, that's where I think the best inspiration seems to come when you're not forcing it. Yeah. But ultimately, sometimes it has to be a bit of a combination of the creativity that you've found and you know, in your daily life, mixed with the right, now I have a paid brief that I have to sort of.
So is it really hard when you get a really specific brief and you know you've got to kind of stay inside that box?
It can be, and it can be sometimes a case of what you are thinking. You think that you might be on track, but actually the director has a completely different vision. And I mean, I've been fortunate that I've sort of seen eye to eye with the directors and the producers on things. They've been fairly happy. And there's always going to be revisions, you know, there's always going to be, not because your work's not any good or anything, it's just, sometimes it might be, but there's just always going to be revisions. But yeah, it can be sometimes difficult to just stay in that, if the brief says this and this is really what we want. Look, I think often the creatives behind it, they're really happy to sort of hear what you have to say and what your ideas are, and if you want to sort of bring things to the table, they're always happy with that. And you can go on your own tangent and sort of break out of that box a little bit.
And then in the revisions, they can rein it back into the brief a bit more.
That's it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think they're always sort of happy to do that. I'm only starting to get used to doing that a little bit, because there's a certain amount of vulnerability, I think, attached to that when you, when you sort of, you might think these things and think, oh, gee, maybe the director should be looking at it from this point of view, or maybe this would sound good. And it sort of takes a different kind of guts to be able to come forward. And sometimes I think in the past I've sort of felt that I was being presumptuous, or, be quiet, you're at the mercy of the director, or, just do your job, do what we've asked you to do. But yeah, I think the collaboration...
Just gotta give it a go.
What's that?
Just got to give it a go.
Yeah, you've got to say, well, look, maybe we could try this. And the worst thing the director can say is like, no, I think you're rubbish. Like, stick to what I want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you're writing, a piece, how do you gauge how long it's going to be? Or do you sort of get the ideas there and then service that to them, and then they can tell you, okay, it needs to go for this long?
Yeah. So that's a really good question, because there are so many different... I think the way... just the way the world has gone with technology and iTunes, and I'm probably going to go on a bit of a tangent now. I'll try not to. But you should have like a little bell that you time's up. I think that, so with catalogue music, I was saying in, I think, episode 1, that catalogue music sort of, it depends on the company. Sometimes they'll say we need 1-minute excerpts of music, and it needs to have a middle section so it's quite specific, and it needs to, the instrumentation needs to drop out here in the middle, and then it needs to rise to a climax in the last 10 seconds. And then in other catalogues, it might be 2 minutes, and there might be all of these different breaks in it. So it might be, we need to have a break of an excerpt 60 seconds long that rises to a sort of like a peak, and then it needs to start again for another 30 seconds, and then 15 seconds, and then 10 seconds, and then 5 seconds, so that editors can then like chop it up and put it into TV shows. One of the shows that I did recently, they said, look, give us a few short ones, give us a few longer ones, maybe for the longer scenes that we've got, and that's where... That's
kind of cool, because that gives you a bit of freedom.
It does, yeah, it does. And then, of course, there's the other side of things where you're... if you have the luxury of having a TV show that you get to score, and I suppose that's so actually score to the...
As in you have
to the footage, footage, and you get the footage every week, and you get to score to that. And I haven't had that luxury just as yet. I've done it on short films, so it's probably, I imagine, in exactly the same sort of way as a short film. You have the spotting session, you go through where the hit points are, and where in the cues exactly where you want to put the music.
Yeah, cool. Nice.
So, cool. I've just got one more question. So what advice would you give to current students, or, anyone trying to get into this industry to, you say that you're really motivated and you can do that, but if they struggle with their time management and to kind of keep that focus, what would you say is the best way to do that?
Yeah, if they struggle with their time management, I think at uni, at college, I think that's probably the time when most students or most people struggle with time management. And look, I think that can be the best time to start to get it together, to start to learn time management. And I don't know how that sort of how that happens necessarily, if they sort of talk to somebody about that, if they just... I think everybody's got the capabilities of, getting it together. And
it's harder when it's on you, because like when you're in your younger years, you have people older than you,
people chasing you,
scheduling things
exactly
for you. Yeah.
And I think maybe that might be sort of what's happening in the education system a little bit, is that students are being a bit spoon-fed, and I certainly know that in high school now they're sort of turning to that you used to have the homework diary and you'd take responsibility for your own homework and you'd sort of write it down, and it was up to you to write it down and remember it and do it. And I know now in schools they're sort of going to this system where the teachers will be uploading the homework that they need to do. And I think that's happening maybe a little bit at uni as well, is that like, oh, the lecture's going to be put up, it has been for a while, gets put up online, which sort of, it's not the up-and-coming generation's fault that they're sort of relying a lot on people to spoon-feed them. But for the students, I think, who have that sort of initiative and that drive and that ability to sort of say, well, look, I do want to have some time management, I do want to sort of really make something of this career, I would say start now. This is the time when you're and look, I wish that I shouldn't say I wish, because, life happens the way it's meant to happen. But I think if you can develop a really rigorous routine while you're at uni and still have your big social life and still go out and go to the pub and go to parties and do all of that. But it might sound strange, but even timetable that, like even put that into your diary and kind of go, right, so I'm going to be at that party until this time, but I know that I want to have a meeting with that director just for some advice, on this particular day, which means I need to prepare some stuff tomorrow. But I also have my part-time job, so I'll need to get up early to do that, which means I can't stay too late at the party the night before. So I think, if students can sort of do that rather than just sort of, went out, got home late this morning. I was out late last night, I'm hungover this morning. I've got this thing, and there seems to be this sort of culture of like priding themselves on like, I'm so hungover and I've got work tonight and I've got to plan this thing for this director I'm meeting on and we sort of like pride that, but don't be proud of that. Be that you can sort of push through after being hungover, but be proud of the fact that you can actually delegate your time and management now when you're younger, because I think there are two lots of students these days. There are the ones that still do that, and then there's this sort of the new student that says, I don't drink, I don't party. I mean, don't sort of like isolate yourself, but definitely keep up the social life, but delegate it all. Don't just sort of it's a balance. It's just that balance. So that's my main advice would be just like get it together now, because there'll be transferable skills that you'll take into your industry, and now's the time to learn where you do have that safe environment of the walls of your uni and your lecturers and people like that.
And it's like making your habit of work, like being professional when it doesn't really matter too much. So then when you get into a situation where it does matter, you're already doing
it's transferable, and you just sail in. Exactly. And I think these days as well, that lecturers are happy to write letters of recommendation as well. And of course, they're only going to do that if you prove yourself at uni. I think sometimes people, I see students and they're in high school and they say, I'll work hard, or they'll be maybe in year 8 or 9 or something. I'll work hard in year 11 and 12 because that's HSC. And then they get to HSC and then they say, HSC doesn't really matter. I'll work hard at uni. And then they get to uni. It doesn't matter at uni. The real stuff is when you leave here. And then that you start to notice becomes their work ethic, and they never really step up along the way. And then that they take that sort of habit into a workplace as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks for that.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
The next episode, we're going to be talking about developing your niche. So we'll look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thanks, Sarah.